Welcome to this press conference, and I appreciate so much you taking this seriously. When a public health crisis is upon us, we need to act quickly. Governor Herbert himself said the response can't come from government alone. Because I am associated with the Benjamin Foundation, and we have known about Co-Diagnostics for years and have actually been thrilled with what they're doing with helping with Zika virus and multiple things throughout the world, and especially in developing countries where they can't afford the expense of many tests. I was thrilled last Saturday when I learned that the FDA has approved this local company to now be accessed in the United States. Friday, I was up at the Capitol. I sat in on 2 caucuses where Mitt Romney was explaining to our senators and our legislators what is being done in Washington, D.C. right now. The ultimate that he could say is talking about some masks that were in short supply. And I just thought, wow, we are not really prepared for this, and we don't know what it will be. We don't know what will happen. But the very next morning when I heard about this, I thought, wow, we don't need to wait 24 hours, or we don't need to send tests to Atlanta. This can be done in our own backyard in 90 minutes. When someone's life is at stake and we need to take people away from the public square so that people can be safe and protected, there is no cause to wait longer than 90 minutes to understand what we're doing. I cannot find how much we're spending for a test for Zika virus. They're not sharing it. They say, oh, this will be free. But you know nothing is free. And somebody's tax dollar, someone's insurance company is paying for something. And I know that when I heard Co-Diagnostics could be performed for $10 or under, depending on the quantities ordered, I thought that is reasonable. Our government, our state should be jumping on this like hotcakes. Well, Monday I had a meeting with a high official that I thought would be glad to hear this news. But when I shared it with him, he said, oh, now that the CDC's on it, it'll get out. I thought, that's not fast enough for me. No, you should be on your phone right now sharing this knowledge with those that you know are in a position to do something. I couldn't stay asleep. Tuesday morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. thinking, okay, I'm going to write those senators, those legislators that I sat in that caucus room with, and I'm going to tell them there is something available now. You still have time in the legislature to allocate funds to move on this. I've written people, and I've even invited the Department of Health, who initially accepted the invitation to be at this press conference, to come. And they were excited. They hadn't heard about Co-Diagnostics. This was in the middle of this week. Then I got a call back. Oh, well, maybe I'm going to send a representative from our department. Then we got an email just yesterday. Well, we can't send anybody because this is a private business and we can't be seen endorsing anyone. Excuse me. This is bigger than business. This is bigger than government. This is about our health and safety. So thank you for coming. You can see I get a little passionate about this. But when a mother's child may be exposed to a deadly thing, or her mother who's in a nursing home, I am not going to rest until we look in our own backyard and do something to help protect the people of Utah. I've invited Joe Featherstone to explain this incredible process that is now being used throughout the world and ought to be being used here in Utah too. Joe, will you come up?
Thank you, Jen. It's easiest for me to present. I have a presentation here. Do you want me to put mics on? Okay. My side here. Okay. We'll just line them up.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Okay. Don't want to be a nuisance. Thank you, Jan. My name is Joseph Featherstone. I'm the head of business development for Co-Diagnostics, a local Utah company, and we are grateful that you've come. We know how busy your time is, and so we appreciate you, and I will not take very much time to explain what we do. But I think it's an incredibly important message, and so thank you, Jen, for bringing the folks here today. It's a remarkable time in which we live, and I think that we're all trying to respond as quickly as we can, and it's something that I think literally everywhere, all the time, it's 24/7 right now about coronavirus. So let me just kind of give a quick overview. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we do and how we do it. First of all, a quick update. So as Jan mentioned, if you see the middle line, just this last weekend, we were approved by the FDA to sell tests to what's called a CLIA lab. CLIA is a special designation. That means they have biosafety levels that will be able to handle coronavirus. And we send them tests. They develop their own in-house tests, and then they can test anybody in the country. That just happened just last week. Before that, we had, as you see the bottom line, we had what's called a CE mark from the European Union for IVD, which is in vitro diagnostic. We've been shipping tests internationally for several weeks, and it's just been this last week that we've been able to ship to some of the domestic labs. And then finally, we're in the process of getting authorization under the EUA from both the federal government, from the European Union, and also the WHO. So that's our quick update. Now, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds about the technology, but there's some things that you need to understand, because as I tell the story, it'll make more sense. This is actually, what we do with our testing is we're testing for the actual virus. It's not like an antibody test. We're actually testing the RNA of the virus. And that's critical as far as accuracy. We have to be accurate. As Jan said, people's lives are at stake. So it's important that we be accurate. So we have a test, and I won't go into this, but it basically is a test that we designed that goes in, we get the sample, we extract the RNA, and this test, this co-primer technology, which we patented just this last year, will go in and find the target on the RNA, and that's how we make sure. Now, these are the samples that are currently being using mostly nasal swabs is what's being used throughout the world, some oral swabs, and then eventually sputum, which comes from the lungs, and then blood eventually will also be used. So, our technology, this is, when you're dealing with RNA, you have a sequence, and it's 32,000 base pairs is the genome for coronavirus. And there's different, what you do is you target a certain area on that genome, and then that gives you a sequence. You can see here, these are the sequences, the A, C, T's, and G's that you see in DNA. And what we do is we pick a specific target on that genome, and that's what our test is based on. That'll make more sense in a minute how important that is. So then what we do is, once we know the sequence, and we choose a sequence, and we put that into our own software. And this is what makes us different than everyone else. We not only own our own technology, we have developed a software that can design these co-primers just literally in a matter of a couple of minutes. And so that's what the software looks like, and this is the data that we get out of it. Now, up until a few weeks ago, pretty much any lab in the world, once you design the test, there's kind of this hit and miss and a little bit of a trial and error that goes through, and could take as much as several weeks. And that's, to be very honest, that was our process up until a couple of weeks ago. But when you're doing trial and error and you're talking about COVID-19, you don't have time for that. We don't have time. We can't take weeks, days and weeks and whatever to respond, or months. It has to be immediate. So some very bright people in our lab have taken all our results that we've cultivated over the last couple of years, and developed an algorithm. So now we go from our software, which takes about 5 minutes to design the primers, to an algorithm that takes about 5 minutes to give us the very best, the optimized set. That's what we order, and that saves us literally weeks of time. We can do that in 10 minutes. Then we order the tests. We have them brought in here. Now, our suppliers, to their great credit, got us tests within a few days. Usually it takes them 10 to 14 days. We had them in 4 or 5 days. We had tests. And then we bring them into our lab and we test them. You can see the lab. We'll show you out here. We bring them in and we test those pairs and make sure they're working. We went from having the sequence, to designing the test, to ordering, to verifying, and having a working test in 7 days. We don't know anybody else that can do that. And that's, again, our great strength, is our ability to respond quickly. Then, as you see this device, we have what's called a MIC, and I won't go into this, but the question was asked earlier, how do we do our test? So you take the sample, you extract the RNA from the sample, we put that into a tube with our test, and we run it in what's called a PCR machine, polymerase chain reaction. It's a molecular test, It takes about 90 minutes we have results. And when we get results, this is what it looks like. You can see this takes about 45 minutes to run this test. This is about 25 minutes in, and we're already starting to see that people are positive here and that we're getting a signal. If there was no virus present, that line would just remain flat. And so that's how we know that you're positive for coronavirus. We have developed with a great partner in Australia the ability to respond anywhere in the world, literally within a few hours if we have to. We've developed what we call the Co-Dx box, or it's a lab in a box. There's basically everything in that suitcase that you would need to run COVID tests anywhere in the world, and we can take that on an airplane as carry-on baggage or as checked baggage, and we go anywhere in the world. What that does is allows us again to respond rapidly, more rapidly than anyone. Most PCR equipment is half the size of this table. It's not something that's mobile, and we've developed with these folks in Australia this little device where we can take that. On this device, we can test 48 people at a time. Is what we have the ability to do. Now, I wanted to show you this. This is, in the last few weeks, we have been contacted by 50-plus countries and shipped tests to many of them. Everyone you see in red has contacted us. They've reached out to us and said, hey, when can we get your tests? We've been shipping tests to several of these countries over the last 2 weeks. We've been shipping as much as we can manufacture, to be honest. And since last Saturday, contacted by labs in almost every state of the union. Okay, so we're shipping tests. We're trying to make a difference, and there's a couple of things that are kind of holding up the process, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, besides us, I just want you to know there's some really incredibly bright people out there doing some really remarkable things. This nextstrain.org, by the way, if you want to watch COVID in real time, go to that website. It's a free website. These are people that do this just as a service to humanity. That they're trying to track this thing. What you see by the different colored dots is not necessarily just where the virus is, but where mutations have already occurred. This is significant. This virus is going to keep changing, and we have to be able to respond quickly to that. So there's not just one COVID out there, COVID-19. There's different strains of COVID-19 that's already happening. It has not necessarily compromised most of the tests that are out there. By my guess is, and our experience is, that it will. It'll eventually get compromised. So, now back to this. I wanted to show you this, how important that when we designed our test, these are the whole area is this 32,000 base pairs, this 32,000 base pair strand that we can choose. The CDC chose a gene over here. We chose a gene in here at 15,438, which is called the RDRP gene. Now, why we did that is we felt strongly that that was the right place for us to be, even though we had some pushback that we were in a different area of the genome than the CDC was. What's happened, though, these vertical lines are showing mutations. So as you can see, there's areas of the genome that are more stable than others. Gratefully, we picked one that is very stable. It has not mutated. And by the way, we check this daily to make sure that our test is so going to be effective. We check daily to make sure that we're not getting mutations. Some of the other tests are already starting to have to deal with mutations, and we gratefully do not have to do that. So, just really quickly, kind of wrap up. We have the ability to respond. Once we know what the sequences are, we think we can respond quicker than anybody. We can deploy literally expeditiously anywhere on the planet if we need to be there. As additional mutations happen, again, our ability to respond in just a few days instead of weeks can make all the difference in the lives of people, and we want to make sure that people understand that. We also, as it mutates and as we need to add things to the test, we can do that without having to go back and what's called re-optimize, which means a lot of companies will have a test that seems fine at the first, but then mutations happen and they have to go all the way back to square one. We do not have to do that. We just add to that test, and we can actually put multiple different targets for the test in the same well. Now, this limit of detection is really critical. We're in the process of verifying this, but our initial limit of detection is extraordinary. Now, what limit of detection means is if someone is on board a ship and they're getting ready to leave, and they have no symptoms whatsoever, but they may already be carrying virus. We can actually go in, test them, and if they have very few virus that will maybe not be caught by another test, we can actually catch that. And quarantine them, even though they may not have any symptoms whatsoever. We could quarantine them and put them in a place where they would keep everyone safe. Let them run their course. But again, instead of testing them and saying, well, you're negative, go your merry way, and then they go home and wherever and infect a lot of people. This is critical going forward that as we find that our test is highly sensitive, that we can pick up those very few copies of virus. And then finally, as Jan mentioned, we are very much a big part of our corporate culture is to have compassionate pricing. We don't want anyone to not get this test because they cannot afford it. That would be tragic. And so much of our thinking in our business is to be ready for developing countries, and so that compassionate pricing becomes even more important. So that's our story. We're able to respond quickly anywhere in the world. We're able to adapt more quickly, we think, than anyone, and we're able to deploy pretty much anywhere, and those are our strengths. Now, we're a little Salt Lake company, but we're making big things happen. And so we appreciate you being here to hear our message. If there's any questions, you see Dwight Egan, who's our CEO, behind me. He and I will stay around to answer any questions you may have. But that's the overview of the company, and just wanted to get that message to you, and I'll turn the time back over to Jan. So, oh, you need microphones.
Yes.
This is called editing.
But I need you here too.
Oh.
Yes.
I just want to thank you.
Oh.
Joe, did you shake
This is
her hand?
incredible, and that compassionate pricing, but also that rapid response to the needs that are out there. This may not be the big one, but,
May not.
but maybe it will help us figure out how we can better respond to the big one that comes.
I have to tell you, I truly believe, as I've lived this for 24/7 for the last several weeks, I think that this is a really good shot across the bow, as it were. We've seen so many unexpected things happen. The stock market taking a serious hit. People losing jobs because they're sourcing materials from China, for example, where they're not able to get their materials right now, so they're shut down and people are not employed. I think those are unexpected consequences that we're learning right now. So hopefully we're learning the lessons and we'll be better prepared the next time. This is it's a deadly thing, obviously. The mortality rate isn't high, but when you're talking about everyone, a lot of people being affected, it's a significant thing. But I do believe that it's hopefully teaching us some great lessons, and I agree with you. This isn't the last time. So.
Great, and I so agree with this, and what Governor Herbert said, the response can't come from government alone. So we need to learn from this. And if the government can't even send somebody here to help take part and pay attention to this, because this should be in Utah CLIA labs right now. There is no excuse for us holding back because there's some regulation that I can't support a private business. This is bigger than government. This is about the people. So thank you so much for coming. I'm thrilled that in our own backyard, we are leading the world. Let's not be afraid to lead. Thank you for coming today.